Our vision is of a thriving network of self sustainable homesteaders and hyper-local small scale producers who are actively working towards a more resilient and sustainable food system. We envision communities coming together to share resources and knowledge, supporting each other's efforts to grow healthy, nutritious food using natural and environmentally friendly practices. By empowering individuals and families to become producers of their own food, we strive to increase access to fresh, locally grown produce while reducing dependency on the handful of entities that control the distribution of the world's food. Welcome to Homestead Grown Live, the live stream and podcast home of the Homestead Grown community. Join us at community.homesteadgrown.org. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Doug here. I am, of course, your host. And this evening, as always, with me tonight is the love of my life, my wife, and my partner in all things, Maria. Maria,
Hello. Hi.
welcome.
Welcome.
So our weekly sound check, everything sounds good.
I think so.
All right, good. So hey, tonight is our topic is community is critical to the hyper local economy, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But first, I wanted to announce that I want to invite everyone to join the Homestead Grown community at community.homesteadgrown.org. And in the past weeks, we've talked about the number of free lifetime memberships. And today I'm going to say that we're going to close that out on January 28th. So if you sign up to join between now and January 28th, then you will be considered a founding member and you will have a lifetime membership so long as you participate. And everyone thereafter, there will be obviously a free component that you'll have access to, but you won't have access to necessarily everything. So some of the things that the lifetime members will get access to are things like all the courses that we'll develop, especially the flagship course, if you will, which is the Grow Model Food System, but also any best practices studies that we do, any benchmark studies. The founding members will participate in the design of experiments of things that are of interest to themselves and of interest to the community. And there will probably be other premium type things, but the general community will be open to everyone at all times, including the ability to build a group within the community for a hyper local community. So that will be free for everyone as well. And so we're going to talk about hyper local communities today and why they are so important to the hyper local economy. I think I covered everything there. Oh, one of the things that I'm learning is always ask for folks to like and share and subscribe. Right. So if you're listening to this broadcast and you have not already liked the broadcast, shared the broadcast, or subscribed to the broadcast, whatever podcast app you use, we're probably on it. I waited until this past week to publish this out through the Apple podcast, but that's now up. So I think pretty much everywhere you can get a podcast, we're probably out there. So like us, share, and subscribe. And also comment. So if there's something about the show that you've enjoyed, putting a comment in the on that podcast notes will help others to find it and also helps to promote it. So anything you do there is greatly appreciated. Okay. So let's go on to our main topic. Maria, we ready to go to the main topic?
I think so.
Okay. So basically, the topic is without an active local community, you can't have a successful hyper local economy. And it's probably obvious, right? But there are a number of reasons that that's probably true. But the question then becomes, so how do we build an active local community so that we can have a successful hyper local economy? And if you think about the four pillars of the Grow Model Food System. The first one being the planning, and the second is the community. It's establishing a network of folks that live close by or as close as you can. Develop that network in order to help close the gap with the things that you can't produce yourself. So it's really important to establish that community, and how you do that is what we're going to talk about tonight. So some of the ideas that we have are, and I'm going to list them and then we'll go through them. And by the way, there's probably 1,000 more things. So if you think of something, feel free to join in the conversation. You can join in via the chat, or you can join in by calling in. But I'll list the 5 that we're going to talk about tonight, that Maria and I had kind of brainstormed. And these are also things that when we get to pillar 2 of the Grow Model Food System, as a team, we will either take the pre-developed materials that we'll have for you, or we'll take those and then customize them, or we'll just, as a team, we'll draft materials that are appropriate to your community, your message, and that sort of thing. So this is all something that will be flushed out even more individually as part of the Grow Model Food System. So the 5. The first one is, if we're looking for how do we promote and form and build a hyper-local community for our hyper-local economy. And that is, first one is knock on your neighbor's doors. Just get out and go see people face to face. Second one is ask the folks that you're currently getting ingredients from, things like if you buy beef from someone already today, or you buy eggs from someone today, reach out to those folks and ask them to join your network. Or the third is, you could go to your local Facebook group or a Gab group, or wherever your social media preference is. And I would suspect that in most social medias, all communities have someone who's established the voice of the community that you can go to, and you can say, hey, I'm looking for someone who sells quail eggs or quail, and who would you recommend? And there will be people that will give you all sorts of recommendations. And then you ask those folks to join. Another is, you could run an ad in your church bulletin that lets the people in your church know that you are interested in others in the community, or in the local newspapers. So the small, very local, we have it's called a Bargain Hunter, and place an ad there to explain what it is that we're doing, and folks could join your community that way. And then the 5th one we have here is, you could add a community developed bulletin board flyer to bulletin boards around town. So last week, I think Maria pointed out that we have a bulletin board in our grocery store, and we can put pretty much anything on that bulletin board, so long as it's not offensive. I would imagine if they realized that we were encouraging folks not to shop there, they might think otherwise. But nonetheless, it is an example of a community bulletin board that we can post to. So those are our 5. And what I would like to do now is go into a little more detail. Again, keep in mind, if you've got something, feel free to throw it out there. Yes, Heaven Hopeful is asking, is this to grow your hyper-local group to barter with? Yes, it doesn't have to necessarily be bartering. You could exchange currency, but yes, the spirit of it is, I will grow the eggs and you supply the beans. But you may find that someone in your group would much rather have cash, because it's more important to them at the moment. And yes, to share resources, to share knowledge. Exactly. That's exactly what this group is. The hyperlocal community is all about. So you're going to go through your ingredient list, and you're going to identify all of the ingredients that you need in order to make all of the meals that you need for the length of time that you're planning for. So let's say it's for the year. And you say, hey, I can't do all of this myself, so I'm going to outsource, but I'm going to hyperlocal outsource the production or growing or raising of that particular ingredient. And it's that network of people that we're referring to.
Well, and I think that it's, the neat thing about it is that not only are you, kind of nailing down your own resources, you're also helping others in your neighborhood community, your, hyper local group to introduce them to resources that maybe they didn't even know that existed. For instance, quail eggs. you know, I think it was only a few months ago that I even knew that quail eggs were a thing and that people ate them. Um, so, to have a group, a network of people, and you go, oh, quail egg. Well, gosh, I mean, that's a great idea. I can incorporate quail egg. So anyway, to create that network of people.
Yep. Yeah, and I like what you said, where uh, really the folks that come on new and join your hyper local community will benefit from all of the people that are already there, right? So a number of them you may not realize that there are opportunities very close by to that provide pork or turkey or whatever. And then you'll also find that within that small group, that as a group you may say, hey, uh, who's going to grow the strawberries? None of us are growing strawberries, but we're all probably buying strawberries from one time or another. So who would like to grow strawberries? And you could find that there's an opportunity for to grow strawberries, or to have a child um, grow strawberries and start to build their own business skills and provide as well. So yep, that's the group.
Yeah. So can I tell a quick story?
Please.
All right. So, um, we live in a kind of a unusual sort of arrangement. Much like the Amish live, have multi-generational living. We are in that situation with my parents living next door. And when I mean next door, I mean attached to the house. But they have their own kitchen, their own garage, their own entrance. So it's like two separate dwellings, but we're connected. But the situation arises multiple times per week where either I go to my parents' house and say, hey, I'm halfway through making chili and I realized I don't have any chili beans. And I open up their pantry and raid their pantry and take a can or two of chili beans. And then they send me a text and they say, hey, any chance you have any cheese for pizza? And I say, sure. So we have our own little hyper local economy right between the doorways here. But I think the idea, or one of the ideas of this, is expanding it beyond just my parents, or in other people's, situations, the next door neighbor, and kind of creating that sort of environment where you can say, hey, Betty down the road, I am running low on my supply of, I don't know, name something, Doug.
Green beans.
green beans, and the lady down the road, I forget the name I just
Betty.
used.
Betty.
Betty's got green beans coming out of her ears. And so Betty's like, "Oh my gosh, of course. I've got green beans." And then, a week or two later, she says, "You know what? I have tons of beef, but somehow I don't have ground beef. Do you have any ground beef?" "Absolutely, Betty. I can hook you up." How nice would that be if that's how our communities worked, where we just are filling in each other's gaps?
Yep. And so and that's again, that's the spirit of what the hyperlocal community is all about. It starts off with, there's a mutual need, or there is a I need to purchase, I purchase beef anyway. You raise cattle, you're my neighbor. Why not get my beef from you, rather than get it from a ranch that maybe is not even that would produce the beef that's not even in this country? And so, if there's ever a supply line issue, um, I'm insulated from that because, well, I can go visit Bob, who's Betty's husband, who raises the cattle, and that's where I get my beef. And as that relationship continues to develop, and these other sorts of activities would start to take place, right? That's the whole concept. Really, it's, let's go back to way things were about, 50 years ago, and it wasn't uncommon that you would have that sort of neighborly interaction that you were talking about, Maria. Today,
Yeah.
it's much less normal. At least I think it is. I could be wrong, but I think it's probably, that's the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah. All right. So Heaven Hopeful asks, do you see people who sell prepared goods to be part of this, like those who are local and make and sell pies, coffee, breads, etc.? We have a few farm markets nearby and local farm sourced goods. Do we try to include them, or are we looking for other individuals and families? What do you say, Doug? Because we talked about this.
We did actually. So, again, uh, we're so absolutely include them. I would say the closer they are to you, the better, um, because part of what we're trying to accomplish here a is a security, a food security. If you've got to travel half an hour to get to the farmer's market, where the farmer's market person traveled a half an hour to get to the market to sell the pie, you're an hour away from each other. Um, I think it's much better to patronize that person than the manufactured pie maker that produces 10,000 pies a day and ships them all over the region. Um, but if you could find someone that was down the street or in another block, or if you live further out in the country, but within a couple of miles, um, that would be, I think, better, because the closer you can have your network, the better. Having said that, there will be items, for instance, coffee, that you probably, most of us don't know someone who grows enough coffee at home to be able to have our own coffee. Then you would want to start finding sources as close as you can. But there's no wrong answer. I don't think. I think, yeah, makes
Yeah,
it,
and I would imagine it probably depends a little bit on the dynamic of your own community. We're pretty rural, so people certainly, um, even there's a couple of farm markets that are nearby. One is about 25 minutes away from us, and the other is 5 minutes away from us. But I'm not sure how many people travel to the one 5 minutes from us. Maybe that one's more local because it's localer to us. Localer? I don't think that's a word.
it's not.
It's not.
I don't think it is.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, I think it's another opportunity to talk to people and ask questions and, hey, where are you? Oh my gosh, you're really close, or wow, you really travel a long way to get here. And then you can maybe decide whether or not they're a good candidate. Or you could say, hey, do you know of anybody? Because I imagine like if they're beekeepers and you don't have any beekeepers in your um, hyperlocal community that you're aware of, you could say to that beekeeper, hey, do you network with other people that keep bees? Do you know of anybody that's, closer to us? And, you know, of course, buy something from them at the farm market. um, but yeah, I think that would be neat.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, and the other question in there, I think either implicit or explicit, is value added products. So if it's something like bread, yep. So same concept. Although I would say, I think that once you expand your community, your hyper local economy community, and folks really start to understand what it is that everyone's doing and can do, I think you'll find that people will start to pick up the different gaps, right? So I'll say, I think I've said it before, but the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. Now we don't really have a need for candlesticks, and we probably, or we may, not need for a butcher. But the concept is the same: is that in your little community, you're going to have, everyone has pretty much the same needs, and folks will start to fill those gaps. And I really want to encourage that it be, older kids that can fill some of these smaller gaps, because they can really start to learn business skills and start to become part of the community. But there's no wrong answer to the question, and it doesn't mean that if you bring that person in, that's the only place you can buy your pies from. You might find someone who lives two doors down later joins, and they are the best pie maker, this side of the Mississippi. Okay. So let me go in a little bit of detail on these five, and let's see where it takes us. We also we thought through some of the benefits of having a hyper local community, and if we have time, we'll get into those as well. But here, the first one we have is knock on your neighbor's door. So again, the idea here is you're starting to form this community. You know that you want to start to grow as much of your own food as you can. You realize that there's no way you're going to be able to do it all right out of the gate. If ever, you may choose never to grow it all or raise it all yourself, because it is a significant effort. And so you like the idea of the food security aspect. You like the social aspect. You like the fellowship aspect of acquiring those outsourced ingredients to a hyper local outsource. So you've embraced the idea. And so now the question is, well, how do I go about getting and finding those people and bringing them in and educating them as to what this is all about so that they can participate as well? So you go out and knock on someone's door. Now, you don't have to literally knock on someone's door. It could be, Betty, and you and Betty are already friends, and you know that Betty already makes pies, or has beef or green beans or whatever it is, and you say, "Hey,
I was going
Betty."
to say, I thought Betty was like up to her ears in green beans.
Well, she might have a lot of beef too. You
Okay.
never
All
know.
right. Until
So,
you knock on her door and ask.
yeah. Well, actually, I think Bob raises the beef, and Bob and Betty are married. So
Oh, okay.
so, um, but now we've got Betty baking bread, or maybe Bob bakes bread. I don't know, but Bob and Betty do a lot. All right,
They are really nice people
and they are.
if
They're
you
great
just
people.
knock on their door and get to know them.
Don't even have to knock on the door. We already know them. We just give them a call. Say, "Hey, Bob, Betty, here's what we're doing. We're going through this course, and we've decided that we're going to try to either produce all of our own food or as much of our own food as we can, and we're going to outsource as close as we can for everything else. And I know you raise beef, and I know you bake bread, and I've always loved your pies at the church picnic. So I'm wondering, I know I need to have 12 pies a year. Can I buy those pies from you, or can I trade my quail eggs for your pies? And how many quail eggs would you want for those pies?" So um, that's one way to do it. The other way would be we're going to produce a brochure or a fact sheet, something that basically distills all of this into a not sound bites, but just the typical threefold brochure that you can hand to Bob and Betty and say, here, read through this. And by the way, on that could be a QR code, and that QR code could be to your hyper local community within the homesteadgrown.org site. And again, because hyperlocal communities are free for anyone who wants to start them, you don't have to be a founder or a paid user, because the whole point of this is to get as many people as we can to start doing this themselves. So that they scan that QR code, it takes you to a landing page that will describe, either it describes how Maria and I have put it together from our basic marketing understanding, or as we work through the module within the Grow Model Food System course, we'll as a team work through it, and we'll come up with the text that's specific to your neighborhood, your relationship, whatever that may be. But you could hand a brochure if you don't want to go through or don't feel like you would get all the high points, if you will. The other thing would be you can just mail them. So let's say you have 100 people in mind, people that may grow something today or raise something today or may not, but you know, or you think they may be inclined to do so, or you don't know them at all. You just know they're in your neighborhood. And if you're like me, I'm not the most sociable person. I think I'm a nice person once I start talking to you, but more often than not, I just assume you probably have more important things to do than talk to me. So I'm probably not going to go knock on your door, but I may be, if you live in my neighborhood, send a brochure to all of my neighbors. It's anonymous, or it could be anonymous. I don't have to put my name on it. That explains what it is and invites them to come join. And then if they join, great. Now we've got that bridge for a conversation where we can get a little deeper into the subject. It also helps to, you want to work with people that are like-minded. So the brochure, especially those that would be custom modified, would probably call out things that are of interest to you to make sure that the only people who respond are people that would be of like mind or very close, if that makes sense.
I have another idea.
Yep.
You could bake something like cookies and send your kids over with the Brussels sprouts and a plate of cookies. Make your kids do the door knocking.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's sort of anonymous if they don't know who your kids are.
Right. I'm not sure the kids would actually would accurately describe.
No. They just say, here's some cookies and a brochure. Have a great day.
Yeah, there you go. That's very neighborly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Honestly, when I was a little girl, my grandmother used to bake like banana bread, zucchini breads, and she would make jelly. And it was one of my favorite things as a kid was when she would hand me a jar of jelly and send me to whichever neighbor's house and say, oh, go take this to Mrs. Mace. And I would run it down there and here's a jar of jelly. Have a great day.
And Mrs. Mace would invite you in and probably make a piece of toast.
And she would give me butterscotch candies. So, yeah, that's another neat idea and a way to incorporate the family, too.
There you go. There you go. And then, and again, the whole idea is the folks that you think are, and even if they're not, you don't have any idea who they are, there's multiple ways that you can approach them or can reach out to them to see if they're interested.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one is ask the folks that are already providing you with something to join, and you can do it the same way. You can talk to them yourself. So if you're at that farmer's market, you can explain, hey, here's what we're doing, and here's what, you obviously you grow asparagus, and I need X number of pounds of asparagus. in the during the season, um, and I'd like to get it from you. And I think there might be some others in this group that I'm in that are that also will need asparagus. Would you like to join? And the really the idea is not just, it's not a marketplace. It's not a place where they say, "Oh yeah, I want to join so I can sell more of my asparagus." It really should be, I will sell my asparagus, but I will also purchase your bread, or will exchange, so we can barter or we can exchange cash or currency if that's the case. But it shouldn't just be a there's a buyer and there's a seller. Really, the idea would be that everyone is both, so that um, there's a mutual connection there, not just a one-sided uh, exchange.
So let me ask a question. So when you're first getting started, obviously the goal is to have your hyper local economy to be like hyper local. But maybe as you're getting started, is it expected or necessary sometimes to widen your lens and maybe source from a little bit further away until you've maybe identified closer sources?
Yes.
Okay. So
So
I was going to say that maybe part of that, asking your current ingredient providers is maybe if we are getting our pork from somebody that's 30 minutes from us, maybe encourage them to join yours, but maybe also start one that is hyper local to them.
yes,
And so, kind of, I want you to continue helping me out, but I think we'll eventually be able to, you know, tighten down and you'll find customers that are more local to you, and I'll find someone who supplies pork that is more local to me. But it's still everybody sort of helping everybody that's closest to them. But that's another way maybe to encourage them to join you, but also to maybe start their own.
absolutely. In fact, I would go so far as to say, you it's the slow is fast and fast is slow.
Yeah.
In the very early stages, I would expect that the hyper local source for many people will be the grocery store, and that's okay. And the
Yeah.
reason I say that is, you don't want to form agreements with people, because these you really will have to have agreements, and because people will be responsible to one another, and you don't want to have a whole bunch of those up there with people you really don't know if they're going to if they're trustworthy. Yeah, there's a sense that you gotta, if you already know them and you know that they're good for it, or you've got a history and a rapport, you're much better, you're probably further down the road. But if they're strangers to you, then there's a little bit of time that you need to cultivate that rapport, and get a good feel for, because this is where your food's going to come from, right? So early on, I think the a lot of the hyper local sourcing will be the grocery store or farmers markets, um, that are not necessarily a particular producer at a farmers market, although you may choose to go that route, um, but the farmers market itself. You don't have to have an agreement with the producer or the farmers market. You just know that that you need X pounds, um, from a source, and that's the source you're going to get it from. And maybe after you've established buying from that source for so long, then you say, okay, um, I want this person in, or I want this family to be part of my network. We're of like mind. We're close enough. They produce a good product, and they would mesh well with the team. Make sense?
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Um, okay.
I got you off track. Sorry.
No, no, that I'm glad you did, actually, because I think I don't want to give the impression that overnight we should expect that we're all going to have everything we're going to be buying or trading is going to take place, next year. It could take years before you close all the gaps, but that's okay. Right? I mean, that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, the goal is to make progress. and the more progress we make in what we're producing ourselves is good, and the more progress we make in sourcing something as close as we can within a group that would mesh with our group, with a person would mesh with our group, it's also great progress.
Yeah.
And rather that than take steps back with people who may not fit in with the group. Okay,
Can I kick off number 3?
sure.
All right. So it was, gosh, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7 years ago. I started a local Facebook group, and it was really intended to be just mostly for moms to ask questions about events and things going on and activities. And um, it has blossomed over the last 6 or 7 years into like a very thriving sort of online community. Now, I mean, there's gossip and um but mostly it's the community kind of helping each other out whenever needed. Well, I mean, this is not a food example, but one of the boys or a couple of the boys decided they wanted a tire swing, and we didn't have any tires, and tires are expensive. So it was like, well, I don't know, let me put a post on the Facebook group. And like within minutes, I mean, there was probably 5 or 6 different people like, oh my gosh, I have tires, they're in my backyard, you know I'd be happy to see all of them go. And it's like, oh, we really just need one. But I am sure that if I posted something in that Facebook group and said, I am looking for somebody who local that grows strawberries, um, obviously in the summer, because where we are, that's pretty much the only way. Um, and I am sure that somebody would step forward or would tag somebody, and probably within minutes I would be able to secure somebody that grows strawberries. And then I think I would probably private message those people and say, hey, would you be interested in joining our hyper local economy, and explaining, maybe sending a digital brochure, or asking for their mailing address. Maybe they'd be a little skeeved out by that. But I think those local groups, whether they're on Facebook or Gab or whatever social media you use, I think those would be an excellent resource for finding people that would fit into your hyperlocal economy.
Yeah, and that's probably today's day and age. It's probably the way that most people communicate, and in groups like that, and they're all over the place, right?
Yeah.
They're in every little town, because in fact, there's more people in your group than are in the town,
Yeah, I
which is
know.
kind of amazing.
Like
Yeah,
dozens of requests every day. And I'm like, we live in such a small town. How are there so many people that want to be a part of it?
yeah.
So, yeah, it's a
But
huge group.
but it is a great way to find and when you said strawberries in summer, I thought, well, no, maybe what you do is you put the post out there that says, is there anyone that knows how to grow strawberries in winter? And you might find that there are 15 people in our little town that say, oh yeah, we grow our strawberries in winter, and we grow them under lights in our greenhouse or in whatever.
Yeah,
And so you
true.
might be able to source fresh whatever it is, just because we asked. And then once you find that person, and if again, um, if the personalities mesh, and uh, you know the belief systems mesh, and everyone's on board, then you might have someone who can join your group.
That's true.
But yeah, that's a great way. And again, I want to emphasize, even on Maria, you talked about sending an electronic version. Great. Electronic version of the brochure is great. And on the electronic version, it could have the QR code, or the web address for your specific hyperlocal group, so that it goes right to your group and your message is there, and your rules are there, and all that sort of thing. So they don't have to wade through homesteadgrown.org in general and find their way to you. They would go directly to you. Now, of course, if you wanted them to come to homesteadgrown.org, that's fine too. But with that QR code or that web address, it might make it easier to go directly to you. I will say that I don't think it's wise for us to become dependent on electronics, including homesteadgrown.org. So great while it's there. It's a good thing to use, but there's nothing wrong with the good old fashioned, I'm going to hand this to you, or I'm going to send this to you, and let's talk later and work it out, because you don't have to have any electronic device in order to have a hyper-local economy. They did it hundreds of years ago. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have telephones. They didn't have smartphones. We can do it again. Having said that, we do have these tools and we'll use them, but we shouldn't become solely reliant on them. Okay.
Yep.
That's me on my soapbox there.
Yeah.
Stepping off the soapbox. Oh, good quick mute finger, Maria. That was our dog Willow. I don't know if you heard Willow barking, but Maria was on the mute very quick, so good reflexes. Okay, number 4 is running an ad in the church bulletin or Bargain Hunter newspaper or whatever. The concept is basically you don't want to spend a ton of money, right? We're not marketers. We don't want to spend a whole bunch of money just to set up a community but a few dollars might end up being worth it. And if you already have a church bulletin that allows for sponsorship of various things, or any organization that allows for sponsorship, and you already support that organization, this is another way to support it, but also to drive folks to your community, then why not? And whether that be in print or electronic, again, it doesn't matter, but the concept is the same. Identify those organizations that you would like to support with your advertising, and the $5 or $10 ad might bring 1 or 2 people that you would add to the group and would add value, and you could add value to them. Maria, you can come off mute, and it doesn't matter if Willow's barking. I'm sure everyone understands, especially this day and age with how many people work from home. I work from home, and I hear a dog bark. I'm probably on 20 meetings a day, and I hear a dog bark in 6 of them. So,
well, yes, one of our kids snuck back to bed. So
he came back, huh?
Yes, he did. So
okay,
there might be further interruptions. So if needed, I will mute again.
Okay. Well, I just covered number 4, which is the running of the ad in the Bulletin of the Bargain Hunter newspaper. And then number 5 is the ad post to a community bulletin boards. And there are probably many of them around most communities. And we will have pre-made bulletin brochures that are different than the brochures you would hand somebody. So we'll have those pre-made, and we'll probably try the first few passes. We'll try a number of different concepts, and we'll try to get feedback on which ones work best, and we'll kind of do a champion challenger to see which one is getting the most response. But we can also, while we are in the or pillar 2, working through the hyperlocal economies section of the Grow Model Food System, we can develop those custom. So we can take maybe the template language and the template graphics that we'll have, and we can swap them out for things that are more specific to our community or to our desires in the text. But and we post those on the bulletin board. And again, we'll have a little QR code there that they can scan. It'll take them directly to your page or to wherever you want them to go. If you had a blog or you had something else where you wanted to introduce them first to your um, whole concept of how to implement this, then it can point to there. That's great too. Okay. Any other ideas? Looks like Maria had to walk away, so she's gone, which means I'm completely out of control now. Um, Let me shift gears to the benefits. And again, if you have any thoughts on how to expand or grow a community for the purposes of the hyperlocal economies, feel free to either put them in the comments now or later, or whatever podcast you're listening to, and and we'll try to give answers or feedback if there's any questions there, and maybe we can try to incorporate some of those things into the pillar 2 of the Grow Model Food System to make sure that everyone can share in all the ideas. But some of the benefits, and I think if we sat down and we went through this list, if we really spent the time, this list could be very, very long, and we could have hours and hours and hours of conversations um, on the benefits. But I'm going to point out 4, and then I'll go back through the 4 and we'll go into detail again. The first one is, well, it's you're going to get the ingredients that you need in order to fulfill the plan that you've developed in the Grow Model Food System. So it's an obvious one. It's the top of the shelf, if you will, reason. It's the initial point that you go out to do it. But the next one is, and this is one I think we could spend forever on. You're building a community. Um, it takes a village, and there's just so many things. Maria and I, we talked about this a little bit earlier, where it's a throwback to the walking over to the next door neighbor and saying, "Can I borrow a cup of sugar?" Um, think of the people that if your electricity went out and you had 100 pounds of beef in your freezer and you knew you just had to get rid of it, um, you're going to give some of it to your friends, right? And or all of it perhaps, and then whatever's you isn't immediately delivered to others, maybe it goes to a homeless shelter or something. But who are those people that you would give that food to, and you wouldn't be worried necessarily about the cost? And I realize that I don't want to make it sound like that you would be oblivious to the cost or the loss, but it's you're sharing, basically. It's that type of a mindset and of a group of people that you want to surround yourself with, because if times get tough, you don't you really don't want it to be an economy anymore as much as it is a community. The economy, the hyper local economy, is what will get you started to the road of a community. And it's that community that within that community is where you'll have that food security. But if times really get tough, it's those people that you'll have their support, and you will support them. And so the closer they are to you, there's safety in numbers. And in fact, I think that was my next benefit, is there's strength in numbers. And the more your community is kind of tightly knit together, um, and the less it is about economy and just want of something, then the stronger that community will be, and the more folks in that community, and the stronger that community is, then the more difficult times as a community you can face. And then the last one that I had is, it kind of goes in line with the others. It's an opportunity for sharing, learning, and learning together. So imagine if you, in your community, you say, "Hey, it's harvest season, and you've planned everything properly, and you have um, 200 quarts of corn to can." There's probably nothing more boring than canning 200 quarts of corn by yourself. But imagine if you had 5 or 6 people and everyone sharing in the labor, and instead of doing 200 quarts by yourself, you do 600 together, right? And the camaraderie, their kids come over and everyone's out, they're outside. It's that sort of thing that you don't get in our culture today. But not only would it be a nice thing, it would be a productive thing. So it takes what could be considered a chore and turns it into a social event that further cements the community. But here's another idea that expanding beyond canning. Imagine if the group sees value in something like a Harvest Right freeze dryer, but you really can't justify the cost yourself. But if you have 5 or 6 people that at harvest time or throughout a harvesting period or beyond would be using the freeze dryer, now it might make economical sense. And again, it's one of those opportunities where folks get together, they prep the food, they throw it in the freeze dryer, and someone else monitors it throughout the week and turns things over. But it's a community activity, and it's a shared activity and a shared cost. Now, there's so many other things that we could get into. Welcome back, Maria.
Hey, thanks.
So there's so many other things we could get into that, but it's a good starter. Really, what I really hope we communicated is the spirit of what a hyper local community could look like. These aren't black and white rules. These are, it's really, again, it's the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. And so hopefully we've communicated that, and an understanding of how it fits into and why it's important, not just in the short term of the course that we'll go through or you could go through. In first you plan, the next thing you do is you start to grow or produce yourself, but also you're identifying where you'll close those gaps. And if all you can do is have one other person in your community at the beginning, and maybe all they're doing is providing the eggs, and you're gonna exchange, you're gonna have a barter system where you provide milk from a goat or something, and that's a good start. And then the rest is from a farmer's market and or the grocery store. That's great. You've identified, you've done your plan, you've started your community, you've started to produce your own vegetables perhaps and fruits, and maybe you have an animal, maybe not, maybe you're going to outsource those as well. But then we continue to grow. And the next year's model, we then look at, or as the year goes along, we're looking at other opportunities as we identify other folks in our hyper local community, or we're asking them. There's a 16-year-old fairly responsible kid who's a next door neighbor. Hey, I will pay you X number of dollars to do this, whatever this is. And if they're so inclined, then they could join as well, and we'll help try to teach them cost accounting and basic business skills that will serve them for years to come.
Hey, I want to read Heaven Hopeful's question, and then I have got an answer. She says, we know families who can their harvest from their garden. We are relatively new to our area. Would it be weird to offer to help them to learn the skill and then have it grow to joining in the community? And my answer is totally do it. Totally. Yes.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can tell you, I have not canned a ton. I mean, I did from time to time. Making sauce took so much time, but I will tell you that in my experience, I think anybody would say, absolutely, wash your hands, get on over here, and yeah, scrub in.
Well,
And we'll teach you. And it's such an opportunity to get to know each other. And yeah, chances are they'll say, oh, here, take a couple of jars home. And that's a perfect segue into, hey, I'm working on building a hyperlocal economy. Do you know anything about that? And, introduce them, and that would be amazing.
Yeah, I love it. The other thing I would that are homestead like that wouldn't love to share their knowledge and experience and help someone who is sincerely interested. I just can't imagine there are many that wouldn't just be overjoyed by you asking to for them to let you uh, kind of join in. So yeah,
Yes.
I think it's a great idea.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. Well, I say it first of all. I would just want to say, um, it sure would be nice if Heaven Hopeful or Mike, you guys move again, move to our neighborhood. I think I think I'd like you to join our community. Um,
Yeah.
but I just thanks again for all the support and everyone who's listening. You go out to community.homesteadgrown.org. Sign up again. The first or everyone who signs up before January 28th will get a free lifetime membership to everything. The whole point is we want to develop a large community of smaller communities that are self sufficient within the community and within their household as best as we can. Because I honestly believe that the more we can extract ourselves from from institutions that can hold significant influence over our decision making, the better. Not to mention the side effects of all that are wonderful things: the work ethic required, the skills that we learn. The I again, I'm going to go back to, I believe the closer we are to nature, the closer we are to God. The further we get away from the way God set things up, the further we are from God. And I don't do a necessarily good job of articulating how meaningful that is to me, but hopefully one day I'll figure out how to say it. Um, but it pays such dividends, not just in our physical lives, but in our spiritual lives. So it really, it's a win-win-win, right? The more we can help other people see those opportunities, the better. So thank you for the support. Thank you for listening to us. Maria, do you want to close us out with a song?
No. No, I do not.
All right. Well, maybe
Thanks
one of
for
these,
the offer, though.
well, maybe one of these days you'll say yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great evening and a great weekend, and we will see you next Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern. And until then, thank you.